Welcome, everyone, to this year's Outlook series. I'm Kasia Kalatis, Investment Director for our U.S. equity range. It is my pleasure to be joined by U.S. Fund Manager Angel Agudo. Angel, there's been a lot of discussions around the Fed this year. Mm-hmm. Will they raise rates? Will they hold off?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball on the future Fed actions. What I know is that the labor market is already heating up. Wage inflation is here, running at 2.5% and all the brackets of the wage spectrum. This was reflected already a year ago in the discretionary space. So that's why a year ago I went very underweight discretionary because the valuations were reflecting a lot of the improvement. No? Today, a disproportionate number of companies that appear in my screens are interest rate sensitive, like financials or banks. If we look at banks, valuations are adequate, best balance sheet in decades, so I'm not shying away and I have very significant positions. I'm not as overweight maybe as I would like to because it feels advanced stage in the cycle, credit quality is pristine, so it can only go worse, and regulation is still heavy on them.
And that leads us to a next question, an important one in terms of monetary policy and has it run its course? Mm-hmm. And policymakers are now speaking about fiscal policy as the next lever for growth. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a tool that could be and probably will be used. There are two aspects here. One would be infrastructure. We're at 60 years low of infrastructure spending on GDP. I've looked at the space and maybe in the same way as discretionary was discounting some uptake in employment, most of the construction materials or some of these companies are discounting some of this recovery. I have exposure through Jacobs, which helps me with energy because they have half of the business is infrastructure, half of the business energy or related aspects that I bought very well with a very good balance sheet. But it's been more difficult. Defense is the other side. I've been involved in defense for 7 years. We are again at a very low historical percentage of defense expenditure on GDP and cyclically depressed as well, not only long trend but the cycle after very heavy cuts after the global financial crisis. Given the global political risk and problems, of course, a year ago the Department of Defense budgets were set to grow for the foreseeable future. A little bit, not a lot. So I changed because valuation was reflecting that long cycle defense companies, where I've been there for 4 to 5 years, to short term.
And very quickly, the oil price collapse certainly has led in a collapse in capex. What do you see is the outlook for that in your positioning?
Well, I've reduced my very heavy underweight in energy. So 3-4 years ago, I was 8-9% underweight energy. Now I'm more or less neutral or a bit overweight if you consider my industrial exposure, like Jacobs or General Electric. Mm-hmm. I did that because our internal model showed some oil price recovery potential driven by the collapsing shale capex. Again, a bit like in financials, the reason why not much more overweighted is because a lot of these companies are recognizing already a higher oil price than what we have today or in the forward curve.
And it sounds as though there's certainly still a number of opportunities that you are following. What is some of the biggest risks?
The difficulty that I'm facing now in the fund or with the outlook is to keep a balance. So I have to take advantage of some of these opportunities of very cyclical sectors at very depressed valuations, but being conscious as well that we are in an advanced stage in the cycle. At aggregate level, margins are high and multiples are not low. So I, especially now, but in the past, I usually don't do very high multiple or peak margins companies. But I have to be conscious that we need a balance of quality or an even better balance sheet now than in the past, while taking advantage of some of these pockets. And that's where I am now.
Angel, thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone for listening.
投资一定有风险，基金投资有赚有赔，申购前应详阅公开说明书或投资人须知。